So the next person we have is Anjon Roy, who's currently the Vice President of Market Development at SIMBA Chain, and we'll be the AV team's just queuing everything up right now for him, getting to those slides. So I've known Anjon for a long time, and he's currently working at one of my startups. So excited to have him tell a little bit about what we've done at the for the additive manufacturing side and using our blockchain technology for that. So Anjon is the vice president, like I said, at SIMBA Chain, a cloud-based smart contract as a service platform. Anjon is a market-facing product strategist, bringing lasting results by leveraging versatility, optimism, and intellectual curiosity. So Anjon, I'm going to pass it over to you. Make sure the audio is working.
Thank
and
you.
We got the
Can you hear me?
queued up.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Anjon.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Joel, and thank you for my co-panelists here. It's been a great discussion. I know I've learned a lot. I'm not from the additive space, and SIMBA is a blockchain company, of course. So we're not formally in the additive space, but we're certainly in a space that's very adjacent to additive and has many potentially complementary use cases. So it's an honor to present here with all of you, and I've certainly learned a lot myself. Do you guys, just quick housekeeping, do you guys have the slide deck, or should I take over on my side of the screen? You do have the slide deck. I'm gonna go off just for a second. I decided, just while kind of listening to everybody, you know, knowing that this isn't really a blockchain conference, it is not. It's obviously an additive manufacturing or 3D printing conference. Although I gather that a lot of you do, you know, with the kind of digital expertise that this space has, and clearly many of the panelists who presented clearly have, there's probably at least some degree of knowledge of blockchain. But I'm going to go off script, and this is intended to be a very short presentation, and we're also going to try to show a video. But I'm going to go slightly off script and just explain a little bit to everybody of what blockchain is, and kind of a very generic explanation. So we don't need to change the slides, but I'm going to come out and just let everybody just kind of close your eyes, just kind of imagine for a second, or you don't have to close your eyes. You're probably in a room by yourself anyways, but imagine a Google spreadsheet that we all have access to. So like an Excel sheet, basically, but except it's Google's version of it. That, you know, we all have kind of, I think most everybody here is probably going to be familiar with that. You know, we all have access to it. Maybe all 6 or 7 of us, or all 70 or 100 of us that are on this virtual conference. So that's number one. We can all have access to it. Number two, let's now imagine that you can only add additional lines to it. You cannot go back and erase. You cannot make modifications. You cannot make updates. You can only add additional lines to the spreadsheet. That's characteristic kind of number one, and what's sometimes called append only. You know, blockchain is a ledger where you can only append. You can add lines to it. Now imagine next is that we all own co-equal copies. And this is really key, because one thing about a Google spreadsheet is, you know, even if 7 or 8 or 10 of us have access to it, or 100 of us have access to it, there's still only one copy, and it's owned by Google. Or if it's, you know, in some instance, it might be, let's say it's my spreadsheet, but I've kind of given all of you access, then it's owned by Google, but by proxy controlled by me, and the rest of you will have to just trust me to not do wrong with it. So we all imagine a situation where we all own co-equal copies, not mirrors of them, not you know, some type of you know, something that's identical, but there's like a kind of parent-child relationship, but actual co-equal copies. That's the decentralization property of blockchain. Now, this next part is, now imagine that any changes that are made, we are automatically kept in sync. Okay, so I make a change, person A makes a change, person B's copy is kept in sync, person C's copy is kept in sync. Those are what we call the consensus algorithms that you hear about with blockchain. Now, next characteristic, number 4, our network predetermines what information is shared on the blockchain. That's the transparency element. So, for instance, I may share some parts of this, of what I put on the blockchain, and that's shared, and we all agree that certain things that, you know, we put on this is shared, but certain things are kept private. which is of course the next part of this, and that our network predetermines what information is private. And that's the security, so an aspect of blockchain. So blockchain gives you this kind of curious mix of both transparency and securities. And then finally, the final characteristic I'll say of this Google spreadsheet is our co-equal copies also include executable code, so that workflows on the spreadsheets are guaranteed to automatically execute. So that's the final characteristic. We'll call that smart contracts. And smart contracts gets more complicated than just that. But a simple layperson explanation of smart contracts is having executable code or digital workflows that are guaranteed to execute, and that we co-own that digital executable code. So having that shared intelligence, or sometimes called the world computer, that if you listen to some of the language coming out of, say, the Ethereum blockchain community. So that's kind of the, a Google spreadsheet, you can only append, everybody owns co-equal copies, we're automatically kept in sync, we predetermine what's shared, we predetermine what's private, and then we also have executable code that is shared and guaranteed to execute. In a nutshell, that's probably one of the better kind of simplified layperson explanations of what blockchain gives. It kind of balances the interests of kind of accuracy and simplicity. So at the end, the best quote I ever found on blockchain was from a gentleman out in London, and works in the insurance sector. And he says, blockchain enables multiple separate entities to share a single version of the data and keep that data in sync between themselves, thus removing the need to reconcile, message, propagate, sync, and otherwise maintain versions of data that are co-owned by different parties to reflect one another. So at the end of the day, why does that matter to you? All of you in the secured, in the additive manufacturing space? Well, for one thing, and we can go on to the next slide. Well, you know what? I will introduce SIMBA in a second. But at a very basic level, and I've heard this from listening to all of my co-panelists here. One of the powers of 3D printing and additive manufacturing is that distributed nature. And the level of resilience that distributed, the distribution gives you. That you can print out in the field somewhere. You don't have to necessarily ship. It adds flexibility and agility and resilience to the supply chain. The challenge, of course, is that there is a security aspect, and what blockchain can give you, among many other characteristics and properties, is that element of security, that layer of trust and verification that complements well with additive manufacturing, and may very well help additive manufacturing and help your space kind of go to the next level, to really go beyond the enthusiasts and the early adopters all the way to kind of the mainstream pragmatic customers, to cross the chasm, as I believe Janet said back at the top of the forum here. So out of all that, what does SIMBA fit into all this? Well, SIMBA's roots, as Joel mentioned, it came out of Atamco. It's our mission, our reason for existence, our raison d'etre is to make it easy to deploy and interface blockchain applications. It's to lower the time to value, lower the barriers for adoption, and democratize blockchain so that anybody can create these decentralized applications using blockchain. We came out of a combination of Atamco and Notre Dame's Center for Research Computing, out of a DARPA grant, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency grant or contract back in 2016. The company was then coming out of that project, was birthed in 2017, and has since expanded into various markets in various use cases. So we'll go on to the next slide, please. And so one of the use cases, one of the earlier projects that SIMBA got involved with was working with the Air Force for equipping and repairing kind of forward deployed forces. So what SIMBA was sold to do is bringing that level of security, which for the Air Force is very important, because, or any military where you have to protect against hostile actors, but be able to do that in kind of less than ideal or forward operating environments, and to do that, blockchain, it was really a really good use case for blockchain. Why? Because the principles of decentralization, obviously the encryption technology and the security properties, first and foremost, the consensus algorithm. So really, making sure that all the designs are on the same page. So really, a lot of the kind of the core properties and strengths of blockchain lended itself well to this use case where security is of heightened importance when you're talking about the U.S. military and dealing with complex supply chains going through environments that may not be ideal. Next slide, please. And so, the previous speakers have certainly talked about, the long value chains. It's a big security issue with, Industry 4.0 or, Web 3.0. And, of course, military, it's even more important. And so for very obvious reasons, the Air Force is looking for this and signed up SIMBA Chain to help with protecting critical data and critical applications. So we'll go on to the next slide, and we're going to go to a video pretty shortly here. And so the name of this project that came out of the military was called Basecamp, which stood for Blockchain Approach for Supply Chain Additive Manufacturing. And it was a project to help coordinate in a battlefield environment, this type of distributed manufacturing. And so this gives, not only does this provide kind of resiliency and kind of agility to the supply chain, but of course security, which complements and fits in very closely with agility and resilience. So, and next slide. So decentralized additive manufacturing. So what do we do here? So SIMBA Chain was signed up to decentralize the additive manufacturing environment here while maintaining the integrity of the data. A couple of things that happens when with additive, what blockchain brings to the additive space. We have the ability to dictate kind of who has access to, or who or what, because that who could also be a machine. It doesn't have to be a person. It could be any type of entity has access to each part of the system. The Air Force created a blockchain prototype so that you can register and track these components on the blockchain, and then finally it requires a unique signature to be a digital signature to be entered at each step, so the Air Force knows who and when made changes to those parts. So it really fits into kind of some of the core kind of value proposition that blockchain brings, where you want to have access to, you want to make sure the right people have access. You also want to be able to give, in certain contexts, that the right people know where something is in the process, where in the process, what step or even what part of a particular step you are in the process. That's another strength that blockchain brings to additive manufacturing. And it also provides that audit layer. And it's potentially a shared audit layer if you set up a network like that. So you can go back, and because of the append-only nature of it, so being able to show an audit, being able to show like how changes occur across time, that time series aspect, if time is really important, then that lends itself really well to blockchain. So why don't we go on to the next slide, and I believe that will be a video break.
SIMBA Chain is a game changer in the blockchain market. Blockchain is like a distributed database or distributed ledger to which you can write transactions, and once you write them, you cannot change them. No one can change these transactions, including you. By using SIMBA, you avoid lock-in to a particular technology. You can actually connect your applications and run your applications on any blockchain. Second, you save lots of time. I mean, we provide a very high-level API that lets you build blockchain applications in basically minutes. We also give you a code. We auto-generate the code for you to connect your distributed applications on the blockchain to your enterprise systems. So you can easily, integrate the code that we generate for blockchains with your enterprise applications.
So we'll end this, and this is you know, beyond the Basecamp project that we've done for the Air Force. You know, where do we see kind of the future of blockchain-enabled additive manufacturing? And so, really want to draw on a quote of a very prominent retired senior executive over at the Defense Logistics Agency, and some of his experience in blockchain. And you see that on the right there. You know, our challenges with implementing 3D printing was driven more by issues of IP access between the government and the vendors than the physical app required to do the print. And so that's by Jeffrey Curtis, who I believe is even an attendee today. He has retired, a very prominent retired executive at the Defense Logistics Agency, but he is working with SIMBA Chain right now, and he might even be in attendance. So I want to give a shout out to him, because this quote really comes from him and his experience kind of negotiating with, you know, at the highest levels in putting these deals together to implement a resilient supply chain for you know, the U.S. Department of Defense. And you know, at the end of the day, one of what blockchain does provide, and we talk about the various kind of technical properties, you know, like the security and the decentralization, and you know, the shared, you know, the consensus mechanism, and we talk about that. But the so what of all of that at the kind of the end of the day is that you have a trust layer. Okay, you have a shared trust layer, and the value of that trust is that it allows modes of collaboration and coordination and social organizing between people and entities that would otherwise not be possible. You know, really at the highest level, and that's really what blockchain can help you enable, and it's especially true in something like additive manufacturing, where it's already you have natural properties of decentralization, you know, inherent already, and blockchain gives you that trust layer that can now modes of operation, modes of organization that wouldn't otherwise be possible. So, you know, one of the areas that we're looking at, you know, the industry is looking at, and certainly we're looking at this, is really think of blockchain as a digital rights management play, or a digital rights management enhancement. You know, little things like the use of designs without being able to necessarily access them. You know, getting that area, because, you know, if you're both a customer or a vendor or a producer or some other type of partner, you know, there's certain things that you do want to share. You know, sharing, you know, can be powerful. It's because when people and entities collaborate, that's powerful. That's super additive. You know, in a way, it's I don't mean that, no pun intended. But on the other hand, there are issues of trust, and there's some things you don't want to share. You know, with tools like zero knowledge proofs, you know, blockchain can allow these possibilities, enable these possibilities that wouldn't otherwise happen. And one of them being the use of designs without accessing them, and then providing credibility and trust between partners and counterparties, and things like usage agreements. So this is just kind of a very short kind of sample, but of, you know, using blockchain as a trusted collaboration layer, so that there are things around predefined ordering agreements, or tracking the design or provenance of you know, of various parts. Having things like, you know, if I'm giving you a design and we have, you know, we're a counter, you know, I'm a party and we're counterparties to each other, you know, knowing that you are not abusing that, you know, that, you know, you're gonna, if our agreement is you're gonna print 10, you're gonna print 10, you know, and having that level of trust is what we see as one of the major features of blockchain-enabled additive manufacturing. And this will be the kind of the first announcement of this. We'll probably have a paper. Well, not probably. We will be having a paper on this very subject coming out over the next several weeks. So do be on the lookout for that. You're the first to hear that, but that'll be coming. But outside of that, I am done, but happy to take questions.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Anjon, for speaking today. And yeah, so once again, the first question I always ask everybody for COVID, I know you're in the DC area, so yeah, interested to hear, you know, how things are going in DC, and you know, I know you have a young family and things like that, so it's probably like trying to stay active is hard in this kind of era.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I wish more playgrounds were around and were accessible and safe. But you know, we're a remote company, so well, it's quasi-remote. I'm remote, so it wasn't a huge change, but it is in that sense. But obviously it is difficult, you know, to not be around other people and not have meetings, especially if you're a social person, and it's yeah, not being able to even being remote. I would go to conferences, I'd go to meet with people, have potential customers or partners or just people in the community, people exploring blockchain, and not being able to do that physically is difficult. But there's Zoom, and there's phone, where there's video calls when my camera's working, and there's audio calls when it's not, and so you adapt, and you still make things work, even under those circumstances. And blessed to have the
And yeah, looking at the outs, looking at the additive industry, what do you feel like you can see, like, from the presentations today, you can kind of see like the connectivity that's happening, and so much of our presentations today were about that data connectivity and how we're doing things remotely and all those different things. So I know you kind of briefly touched on it, but you can, like, where do you see like blockchain? You can see where blockchain's headed. Do you see even like, how do large scale companies and these different groups start communicating? Where do you see that heading?
Yeah, it was really informative for me to learn from all my other co-panelists here, co-presenters here, because we speak. There is some similar language that we speak. The additive space is clearly very, very digitally, as you would think, but and maybe that's obvious, but if you're in the space. But for somebody who's not in the space, it was very kind of enlightening me to see how digitally savvy and mature the additive space is. In many cases, what I see is you guys are trying to bring the digital thread and digital transformation into building stuff. And maybe it shouldn't even be called additive. Maybe it should be called something else that has the word digital or technology kind of embedded in there. I didn't even fully realize it until maybe not just today, prior to today, but as I've kind of become more familiar with the space, how strong of a digitization is in like the DNA of your community. So where do we fit in with that? I think blockchain fits in that very naturally in a number of areas. There's the digital thread side, there's the trust, there's the collaboration, and there's the resilience and decentralization, and building a more resilient supply chain. I think blockchain is very key to that, but it's very obvious to me that additive is also very key to that. Building more resilient and responsive, supply chain, one that's more agile, one that can have kind of modes of collaboration that wouldn't otherwise be possible because of blockchain being that being that trust layer. But the trust, really what it enables is a collaboration layer, and maybe we should call it a collaboration layer as much as we call it a trust layer, because even trust itself is not necessarily valuable unless it gives you something else. And what it gives you, it gives you a couple things. It gives you the security, but it also gives you that ability to collaborate, and that seems really important to the additive community, just by the very nature of what you guys are doing.
Yep. No, that's a great answer. So yeah, we're gonna head on to the next speaker, but Anjon, thanks again for stopping on by and presenting today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, everyone.
Virtual hand clap.